look at our third logic game. Just as a reminder, we're going through the June 2007 LSAT since that's the one that's currently available for free on the LSAT website. The introduction to the logic game reads as follows. A cruise line is scheduling 7 week-long voyages for the ship Freedom. Each voyage will occur in exactly one of the first 7 weeks of the season, weeks 1 through 7. Each voyage will be to exactly one of 4 destinations: Guadeloupe, Jamaica, Martinique, or Trinidad. Each destination will be scheduled for at least one of the weeks. The following conditions apply to Freedom's schedule. So the first thing that we want to think about is what information we can get from this initial paragraph. So the first thing we can say is, what are we trying to do in this game and what type of game is it? The 2 main headings of games are basically binary or grouping in and out type games or assignment games. In this case, what we're trying to do is we're trying to assign destinations to weeks so it fits within that assignment game type category. So when we have something that's categorized as an assignment game, it's oftentimes helpful to draw a grid, as we're going to do here. You'll notice that the grid is convenient if for no other reason than it gives us a handy way to enumerate both the locations and the weeks that we're talking about here. So even if we weren't drawing this grid, we would have to write these guys down anyway. So the grid isn't really that much more effort, and it's going to, in a lot of cases, be very helpful. So the next thing that we want to do is think about what information we want to take from this introductory paragraph, because it's super important to not forget that there's useful information there. So here, the first sentence says, a cruise line is scheduling 7 week-long voyages for the ship Freedom. Not sure what to take from that. Then it says, each voyage will occur in exactly one of the first 7 weeks of the season, weeks 1 through 7. So if we're assigning locations to weeks, what that actually tells us is that we're only having 1 location per week because we only have 1 voyage per week. So we can say there that we're going to have 1 yes in each column of our grid. The next sentence says, each voyage will be to exactly one of 4 destinations, which is actually why we can say this here. And then the last sentence says, each destination will be scheduled for at least one of the weeks. What that means in terms of our grid is that now we also have to have at least 1 yes in each row. So we can say, greater than or equal to 1 for each of our locations. We also might want to write that down as a reminder to start off our list of rules, just to make extra sure that we don't forget. So we can say, each destination at least once. And again, you don't want to waste too much time thinking about how to write things down perfectly. You just want to get it down in some way that makes sense to you. So now I think we've taken everything that we can from this initial paragraph, and now we want to go to the explicit list of rules. The first rule says, Jamaica will not be its destination in week 4. We can just write that down as J not equal to 4, or something like that. We're going to come back once we're done with the list of rules and say, what can we put in our table? But for now, let's just get the complete list of rules down in a useful sort of shorthand so we have it ready for us to use when we need it. The second rule says, Trinidad will be its destination in week 7. Well, along the same line of reasoning, we can then just say T equals 7. The third rule says, Freedom will make exactly 2 voyages to Martinique, and at least 1 voyage to Guadeloupe will occur in some week between those 2 voyages. So this rule actually tells us 2 things. The first is that there are exactly 2 M's in our sequence. And the second thing is that those 2 M's have got to be of the form M, some stuff maybe, G, some stuff maybe, and then another M. So it's oftentimes helpful when you have a rule that actually gives you multiple pieces of information to write them down separately, just so you keep each individual line here as simple as possible. The fourth rule says, Guadeloupe will be its destination in the week preceding any voyage it makes to Jamaica. So here, what this is actually saying is if we see a J, we have to see a G immediately before that. So what we can write that as, if we see a J, then we have to see a G immediately preceding. Notice that this is slightly different from just writing down, we have to see this GJ construction. And the reason that I've written it this way is because this does not mean that every time we see a G, we have to see a J after it. That this rule only applies to where we place the J's. And I want it to be clear, and if I just wrote down that G and J go together, that would imply more than the rule is actually saying. The last rule says no destination will be scheduled for consecutive weeks. So I can just write down no consecutive weeks. Now that we have a complete list of rules at our disposal, we want to come back and think about what we can put in our table to start making deductions, and hopefully make some deductions that will make it faster for us to go through the questions. So here, we already did this one, saying each destination shows up at least once. We already put that here. Here, J does not go in the fourth week. Well, that's easy enough. We can just do something like that. We know that T goes in week 7. Well, then we can put a yes in the T row for week 7. Something like this. We also know, because there's only one destination in each week, that we can cross out these other options for week 7. Notice that we can't do anything here because we don't know how many times T shows up. We have exactly 2 M's. Well, what we can do here is we can refine this rule and say, rather than just knowing that M has to go at least once, we can say that there have to be exactly 2 M's. But we still don't quite know where they go, so we'll leave that alone for now. Here, in a similar fashion, we know that we have to have an M, a G, and then another M, but that doesn't specifically limit where any individual M's can go. So again, that doesn't lend itself to crossing out anything here. If you don't immediately see that, you could ask yourself, is it possible for M to be first? Is it possible for M to be second? And go through that line of reasoning, and you would notice that there's nothing that you could cross out for sure. Here, we have a rule of whenever we see a J, we have to have a G before it. So in that way, what restrictions does this put on J and on G? Well, given that this rule still means that we could see a G without a J, it doesn't really put any restrictions on where G can go, but it does put some restrictions on where J can go. Because, for example, J cannot go first because there's no room for G to come before it. So we can actually get rid of this as an option. We could go through and ask ourselves about the rest of the slots, but because we haven't crossed out anything for G, there's nothing else to limit for J. And then the last statement says that destinations cannot go in consecutive weeks. So if we know that something is in a particular week, we can then block out the weeks on either side of it. We notice that the only thing that we've placed in the affirmative here is T. But if we know if T is in week 7, then we know that T cannot be in week 6. And we could circle back to make sure that given the new things that we've put in our diagram, that we could go back through the rules and we can't really do anything more. So we've made pretty much as many deductions as we can up front, and we're ready to go to the individual questions. Question 1 in this game, or question 11 overall, asks, Which one of the following is an acceptable schedule of destinations for freedom in order from week 1 through week 7? So this is the typical introductory question of which one of the following satisfies all the rules. And like we've said before, the easiest way to approach this type of question is to go one rule at a time and scan each of the answer choices to see which ones break. Now here I've taken the liberty of writing down the abbreviations for each of the answer choices so we have something visually to go through. Now, because we're going to be checking the rules against those answer choices that we haven't gotten rid of yet, it makes sense to check the easy rules first and leave the annoying ones to the end, because then we'll only have to look at them for 2 answer choices rather than 5. So for example, this rule of each destination has to show up at least once. It's not a difficult rule, but it actually requires looking through and making sure that each of the 4 letters shows up. So well, that's kind of a pain to do. Let's do that at the end if we have to. If we start here and we say that J cannot show up 4th, we could just easily scan our answer choices and get rid of those answer choices where J is 4th. So well, this one's okay, this one's okay, this one's okay. Oh, in choice D, J is 4th, so we can cross that one out right away. And like we said before, it's helpful to cross out the entire answer rather than just the letter, because it helps you make sure that you don't keep looking at it, because you don't have to. It's already out of contention because it broke one rule, and it'll just help you be efficient in that way. Now we can look at the next rule here. We say that T has to show up 7th. So in this situation, we just look, we know that 7th is last, and we say, well, T has to be here. Oh, in choice E, it breaks the rule because T is not 7th. So we've very easily gotten rid of another answer choice. We say that there have to be 2 M's that show up. You could either do these 2 rules separately, or you could put them together. In this case, let's just do them separately since it's pretty fast, to say that there have to be there have to be exactly 2 M's that show up. So here there are exactly 2, here there are exactly 2, and here there are exactly 2. Okay, then we go to the second part of this, that there has to be at least 1 G in between them. So here we have 1 G in between the 2 M's, that one's fine. Here we have our 2 M's and there's only a T in between them. So that breaks the rule, and this one goes. And here we have the 2 M's and we have a G in between them. So now we're down to 2 answer choices. We see here, whenever we have a J show up, we have to have a G come before it. So we can then look for the J's and make sure that they satisfy the rule. Here we have a J and we have a G before it, so that's fine. And no other J's show up in this sequence. Here we have a J and we have a G before it, so that one's okay. But you'll notice we also have a J over here in the first place, and there's no room for a G to come before it, so we've broken a rule, and answer choice C now goes away. Notice here that we're down to just 1 answer choice. So we can say, well, by process of elimination, our answer has to be A. You could double check just to make sure that you haven't made a mistake and make sure that it satisfies the rules that you haven't looked at yet, because you only have to do that for 1 answer choice. It won't take you very long. Here we don't have anything going in consecutive weeks. That seems fine. It's also the case that we can see G, J, M, and T all show up in our sequence. So we have in fact confirmed that choice A is the correct answer choice and satisfies all the rules that we were given.